I have married a non-Indian guy. I know. Well, I mean, what was I thinking? My mum would be like, yeah, what will the community say? I was really close to my dad, and I could never see him disowning me. My husband was like learning the basics. Japiniya. He thought getting married to me, he'd have like a wife who'd be cooking all this Indian food.
Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
On this week's episode, and listeners are going to be like, oh, not again. We don't have any other guests. This is Su, who is one of Taj's friends. I feel like I said this last time. Su, we're getting all of Taj's friends to come on the podcast.
That's because it's so interesting.
Everyone's been so interesting. So you've got a high bar.
No pressure.
No pressure. Okay, so Su here today. So Su Bhagi is from Swindon, one of Taj's friends. And for our followers on Instagram, you might know Su from an allotment project that Changing Suits have. So I hadn't met Su until, well, I've seen her on Instagram, so I feel like she's always surrounded by nature. How are you doing, Su? Are you okay today?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm hoping that we'll have a good conversation today.
Oh, we will. If you're friends with Taj, perfect. Yep. Yes. Okay, so the topic today is mixed marriages.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is something that we haven't spoken very much about on the podcast, so which is really surprising because obviously it is touching many people's lives. So, just in regards to your story, talk to us. Why are we talking to you today, Su, about mixed marriages?
Because I am in one. I have married a non-Indian guy. I know. Well, I mean, what was I thinking? But I'm in one. I never, in my wildest dreams as a young child, thought that this is where my life would end up, but it has. So I'm quite happy to kind of discuss that today.
Should we start with your growing up and what your parents were like and why you didn't think that you would be in a mixed marriage? Yeah, let's start from the beginning.
Okay, so I'm the eldest of 4 children. My parents from India, from Punjab. My dad was very, very traditional, and he brought us up. So there's 3 girls, and youngest was a boy, or is a boy. And he was very strict, and where he came from in India was a small village. So he tried to bring us up as though we were still living in that village. So he came over here, and he was very clear with what our kind of future was going to be like as girls, and that you would have an arranged marriage. When you come of age, you will move to your in-laws, move and live with your in-laws. And it was very much a message of, once you go over there, we're not your family anymore. They're your family. And I remember as a young girl feeling absolutely terrified that I was going to be away from my family, who I loved so much, and I'd have to live with a new family, and God knows what the expectations would be for a girl. Now, we grew up. Sorry, go on.
So can I just ask, in regards to those conversations, because I'm just looking back and thinking, oh, did we ever have those conversations? It was, I suppose, a given, I guess, because
it's expected, yeah.
Just expected. But did you ever have those conversations with your parents? Because we didn't. I don't remember those conversations.
Oh, yeah, we did. And like me and my siblings were quite curious. So we would ask questions as well. We would watch Bollywood films every week, most nights. There was always something. And my dad loved the old black and white films. But I remember watching those films and looking at the difference between a man's life and a woman's life, and looking at their family setup. So when the woman gets married and enters the in-laws' household, they're cooking, they're cleaning, they're like servants.
They don't show that on Bollywood films. It's usually the dancing, is it? Which Bollywood films are you watching?
That's what I'm talking about. The old 50s, like the black and white films. So my mum and dad are real fans of the golden oldie films. So we watched loads of those when we were young. And obviously, you know, throughout the 80s, you start watching the more modern films and stuff. But I think as a young child...
Where you don't see the kitchen at all in the film.
Yeah, it's like the 90s films were completely, to me, they felt so modern. But my dad still had that kind of image in his head and this ideal that this is what happens, this is what we had to do, this is what you have to do.
That's with quite a lot of us. Our parents came over and it's almost like we were stuck in old India.
Yes.
India has become more westernized.
Yes.
But we were still what it was like when they came over.
Yeah,
So
it's like time had frozen.
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
Yeah, very much. And I'll tell you what, it became really apparent. I didn't realize just how stuck in time or frozen my dad was. That when we went to India, when I was about 12 or 13, we had like the gutta, you know, oiled hair, long plaits. Like my dad wouldn't cut our hair. We went in Punjabi suits, absolutely nothing done to our faces. That was not allowed. And we got there, and I remember meeting our cousins who were like younger than us or same age, Western clothes, bobbed hair. It was just like, whoa. You're bringing us up as though we are living in the Pind back in the 70s, 60s, right? And these guys in India have completely westernized and moved on.
That's so interesting, because I've never thought that's such an interesting point, because when they came over, it literally is them freezing in time, and they had carried on in India as, okay, well, let's westernize because that's what everyone else is doing.
Yes.
However, there was that image. Oh, that's so interesting.
It's almost like our parents wanted to keep
the utopia
they used to live. Yeah.
And in an ideal,
because they had moved to a different country, hadn't they? And they had to keep something for themselves.
Yeah, and they didn't move on. So because they weren't living in India, they didn't move with the times as India was moving forward. They just stayed with the same kind of ideals, if you like. So that was a real, for me as a child, it was such a massive eye-opener, because we used to like say to our parents, why can't we cut our hair? Or, you know, being brought up in Swindon where there were hardly any Indians, like the majority English people. And you kind of look at them and you look at yourself and you think, God, you know, it's so different the way that we're being brought up. And even things like, you know, meeting up with your friends or doing anything like that was just not allowed.
How did it feel like? Because we lived, when we were younger, we lived in an area where there were quite a lot of South Asians. But you came to Swindon where it was predominantly white.
Yes.
How was it growing up? And it was the same for my husband as well, where he was the only Asian in the village. I was
I mean, you know, when you're a child, so we moved, so we used to live in town. So up until the age of 10, we lived near the town centre. It was very multicultural. The school that we went to was very multicultural. Our cousins lived, you know, within walking distance. So from that point of view, it felt great because there were so many different nationalities. Even on our street, there were like Italians, Africans, Indians, you know. But I think it became more of a challenge when we moved to a different area in Swindon when I was 11. My dad bought a shop, and where we moved to was predominantly white. There were no Indians on our street. It was just white. There were no other nationalities.
I was going to say something about the shop, because that's a typical, you know, whenever they in comedies or whatever, it's a typical joke, isn't it? The Indian will get the shop, or a taxi driver. But these things what has helped us build the businesses and thrive, basically. But it's laughed upon.
It is. I mean, as an adult now, I look back and I think, you know what, I completely get why my dad did this. You know, he had 4 children. He was a bus driver. My mum was working in a factory, and they wanted the best for their children, you know, and they knew that what they were doing, the jobs that they were doing, just wasn't giving them enough. So moving into a shop, I mean, I remember hating it, thinking, why are we moving? And we're moving into this completely new area where we don't know anybody. The shop was open 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And you just felt like you were constantly working, you know, and it was like childhood had gone, right? That you had your childhood.
On that point, I mean, having a shop that you are, because I sold mine last year, and you don't realize how hard it is. And
Yes.
it really brings back from what you're saying. Well, yes, our parents or grandparents did have shops, but they worked bloody hard for it
Yes.
to get us where we were.
Yes. Yeah. And I totally appreciate that.
In regards to, so how old were you when your dad got the shop and you moved to a completely different area in that case?
So I was about 11 because I'd finished primary school. In fact, we'd moved to the shop and I was finishing the last year of primary school. And so, yeah, so where we moved, the secondary school was different to where all my friends from primary went to school. So again, it was just, everything was just completely new.
But then at 11 years old, did you realize when you went to school that, hold on, we're a different color? Or was it very normal?
Do you know what? The color thing never even entered my head until, when we were in the shop, we had some people that were being racist, basically. So, you're walking home from school and they're shouting out Paki to you.
What's going on?
Yeah. You're aware that you're Indian. And you're aware that you're a different color. And I think I've always been aware of that. Like for me in my head, that isn't what defined me. I didn't put any emphasis on that.
But you didn't have those kind of experiences. Your everyday wasn't like that. It was just not on the rare occasion that you had things like that, which is fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, in the first year, it was pretty bad because we knew, and they're like, oh my God, these brown people have just taken over and blah, blah, blah. We ended up, there was this really nice guy who lived in the same area and he was married to a lady from Goa. So he was English, married to a brown lady. And he was very community kind of aware. And he used to speak to my dad and say, are you having any trouble? Blah, blah, blah. My dad was like, actually, yeah, we're getting our windows smashed in. We're getting abuse, people coming in, whatever. So he held a meeting in the community center.
Oh, wow.
And he invited my dad along and the neighbors. And he said, right, I want to introduce you. This is Mr. Bhagi. He's now a new, shop owner. And then my dad spoke and said, look, I'm not here to cause any trouble. I'm here to serve you. I'm keeping the shop open 7 days a week, 12 hours a day.
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Hello?
Yes.
How much more do you want from me?
and do you know what? Before we moved into that shop, it was just a sweet shop. It was just like it wasn't even like a convenience store. So,
and just tell me, did your dad extend it?
Oh, yes. Of course.
And then it was the mini Tesco's. If anything, Tesco copied him.
Yeah. The alcohol came in, the videos, rental, everything. We just threw everything at it. And it worked, it worked. And after that meeting, people backed off. And obviously parents it was mainly like late teen children that were just being a pain. So, but yeah, it was.
So the awareness helped.
Massively helped. And that guy
brings up that brings up a really good point though, because from where a lot of the communities, when they came over from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, wherever they came in from, it was very much you stayed in your area because of that racism, because of the hard time, and you wanted to know each other because you understood each other. When you brought yourself out of that situation, and that very much is happening now as well, where people are coming out of these main areas, whether it's South or wherever it is, it's about raising that awareness because, hey, we're just people. We are people like you.
Exactly. We're human beings.
Yeah. So the topic of this episode is obviously mixed marriages. Talk to us. Where did you meet your husband, and what was the reaction from the community? Obviously, that's what we're waiting for.
The community.
Let's go with the romantic. Let's go romantic first. How did you meet first? Let's go Bollywood first.
Okay, so
and you're not in the kitchen, so we're talking about the 90s Bollywood.
Definitely wasn't in a kitchen. Basically, I had quit my career and had started a course in acupuncture. And I was in my late 20s at the time. And to be honest with you, at that time, I thought to myself, I just come out of a relationship, again, with a non-Indian. And I thought to myself, I'm done with relationships. I now want to focus all my energy on this course and starting up my business and helping others with their health.
Hold on 1 second. So, okay, so you had relationships. You weren't
Yes.
married yet. So this is,
Yes.
it was.
Were you allowed to have these relationships?
No.
Yeah.
My mum knew, like my mum's a softie, so I could tell her, and she'll be just like, oh, okay, just as long as, do you know, all she was worried about was as long as nobody from the community sees you, go and do what you want to do, just don't do it on our doorstep, kind of thing,
And
so,
that's
open-minded.
okay. That is an interesting way of looking at it as well, because
yes, my dad,
we wouldn't have had that.
No, my dad. So my mum was more kind of open-minded. My mum was more supportive of, whatever makes you happy kind of thing. Whereas my dad was very rigid and very traditional, and absolutely no way on this planet are you, even allowed to spend any time with a boy. I couldn't even have friends who were boys.
So were you ducking and diving and?
Yeah, I mean, God, the person that I was dating also lived in Swindon, and I told him, I said, look, we can't be seen in the town centre. So we would always go out of Swindon, wherever we wanted to go. It was always out of town. Yeah, and we just kept it that way for quite a few years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, talk us through it. So you're doing your new course.
I'm doing my new course, and in the second year, I think it was, we had another cohort join us. They were doing like the 4-year part-time course. I was doing a 3-year degree. They joined us, and my husband was part of that cohort. We didn't really even talk to each other for a couple of years. We weren't even talking to each other. Towards the end of the course, we were placed in a group together. So my surname begins with B, his surname begins with B. So the two of us were in a group with another guy. And that's when I really started to get to know him.
The other guy was a bit of a third wheel then.
The other guy was like, but
he's like,
yeah, but even then, so I was really good friends with the other guy. So I'd made friends with the other guy, like literally from day one. We got on really, really well. So it's me, my now husband, and that other guy. And I still wasn't like, I was just talking to them as friends, because I've always been used to having boys as friends. I've been more kind of like, I seem to kind of get on better with boys, or seem to be on a similar wavelength with males more than females when I was younger. Yeah. So anyway, so to me, he was just a friend. Anyway, it got to the end of the course, and we were all saying goodbye and, good luck and all the rest of it. And came back to Swindon, back with my parents. And I get an email from my husband. And he's like, do you fancy going to Snowdonia? And I was like,
as a first date?
It wasn't. Well,
we're going to do it properly.
It's a little bit naive, I have to say, that one of our conversations as a group was, what do you like doing? Where do you like going? And I said, I love mountains. I love nature. I'm always, interested in all that sort of stuff. And I remember him asking me, have you ever been to Snowdonia? And I said, that's one place that I really wanted to go to, and I've never been to before.
Do you wish you had said, somewhere like Hawaii, and then you go to Hawaii?
I think his budget would have stretched out far, to be honest.
You shouldn't, it would have been a bit best, and then you could have been like, oh, you didn't say Hawaii, no, I don't.
I was like, I should have picked somewhere a bit more exotic. But yeah, and so he was like, do you fancy going to Snowdonia? And again, in my head, I'm thinking, oh, right, he's a mate, wants to go to Snowdonia. And I never really see the difference between male and female friends. Yeah. To me, it's the same. So if a male friend's, do you know what I mean?
But did you tell your parents that you were going to Snowdonia with a
male? No, because my parents at that time still didn't understand that I can be friends with men. They still couldn't get that, because I think they just thought, how can you be friends with
but then
men?
The fact that you've just said, I didn't notice the difference between men and women.
Yeah.
Well, what was the reason? Would you, if he had been a woman, would you have told him?
Absolutely.
With this person?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I have in the past used my female friends and said, look, I'm going away for the weekend with so-and-so, or I'm meeting up. So if I was meeting up with my male friends, I used to be in engineering, so I had a lot of male friends. Now, like after marriage, my mum's like, yeah, go and meet your so-and-so friends. They all came to my wedding as well. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Before marriage, it was very much like, no, we don't get it. How can you be friends with men? you know? So I would have to lie and say, okay, it's female.
Okay, so you go to Snowdonia and you realise you're in love.
No.
Obviously. No? Okay.
No.
He took you to bloody Snowdonia.
No, I'm not like, I'm not one of these that just like falls in love, and you know, I'm not like, oh, this is so amazing.
You made
blah,
him
blah,
work
blah.
at it.
I was going to say he had to work hard.
He did, yeah, he did have to work hard, and I'm very like, I'm a bit of a long-term thinker, because you know, there are times when you can have flings and all the rest of it, but I was in my 30s by now, and I was thinking, right, you know, I've spent the last 10 years just messing about and not taking really anything very seriously. And now I'm like, okay, you know, we've gone to Snowdonia together. I don't actually know anything about you. You know, that's really important to me. I need to know who you are before I kind of like commit to anything, really.
You know, the fact that you've obviously previously gone out with someone that's a non-Indian, and now you're just about to marry someone that's non-Indian. Did it ever come in your head? Because obviously you've had a very traditional upbringing.
Yeah.
Was it ever in your mind that actually this is a very grey area?
What, going out with a non-Indian?
Yeah.
Oh, I knew it was, I mean.
Do you think that's why you done it? Because it was going against the green? And
it wasn't, no, I don't think it was a conscious decision that, you know what, I'm going to go out with a non-Indian, because I've dated Indians as well. You know, it's not as if I've never dated one on my own, if you like. I've just gone along with somebody who I connect with. So if there was a connection there, if I felt like, oh my God, we're on the same wavelength, we totally get each other, I don't give a shit what your, I don't care what your, I don't care what your color is or what your background is. You know, if we have the same outlook on life, and the same, you know, just being kind to each other, being respectful to each other, that's enough for me.
Do you think, because obviously one of the things that our organisation very much looks at is culture and getting through those cultural barriers, at any point, I suppose more with your now husband, or before, obviously just prior to getting married, did you have any cultural differences where you were like, oh, okay, that's interesting, or I'm learning this? Or how did you look on the culture differences there?
So my husband's Irish, but he actually practices Buddhism. So that was something quite interesting for me, because I was quite interested in Buddhism at that time as well when I first met him. So that was something that we could kind of connect with. And also I'm aware that I'm Hindu Punjabi, and I'm aware that Buddhism and Hinduism, there are many kind of overlaps in the way that you kind of look, your outlook in life. And I'm more of a kind of, I'm not very much a religious person, but more kind of spiritual and more philosophical. Yeah. And so is he. So for me, you had that
connection there.
Yeah, for me, I thought that's way more important to me, that we have a similar philosophical outlook on life, more so than, oh, we share the same religion, because I didn't really practice my religion. So that really didn't mean much to me.
So how did you break this to your mum and dad? Mainly your dad, would I say?
Yeah,
okay,
so
I'm ready to get married to a non-Asian person.
I kind of kept it under wraps for as long as I could, because I thought, I don't want mum knowing, I don't want dad knowing, because they'll immediately jump on the whole marriage thing. You know, they're like, right, if that's who you've chosen, you need to get married. And I'm not one to rush into anything. You know, I like to kind of take my time and get to know and just suss out, you know, is this person a good long-term partner, or is this person just here for, you know, short-term ride kind of thing. So I kept it under wraps for as long as I could. My mum found out, and I can't remember how she found out, but she found out, and she said to me, that's all fine. She said, but, you know, look at your age. I was 31, something like that. And she said, you know, I'm going to have to tell your dad that you're seeing this guy. And, you know, from what you're telling me, he sounds like a nice boy and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and I said to my mum, I said, look, can you just hold off? Like, the minute you tell dad, if dad comes around to, you know, accepting him, the talk is just going to be about marriage. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet. But she didn't. She's like, I can't hide.
Whatever, let me tell him.
I think she was just a bit excited. You know what I mean? And she just thought.
Wasn't she worried or anxious that he might say no because you said that he was so traditional?
I think she thought that she'd be able to talk him round, and she'd be able to, get him to see it from my perspective. Like, it's my life. I'm going to be spending the rest of my life, married or whatever, and surely that's got to take priority. But the other thing that I haven't mentioned is that when in my early 20s, my younger sister had cancer, and she passed away after about 18 months of treatment. And my parents, especially my dad, really made a conscious change towards the rest of his children, in the sense that he basically said to us, look, we're not going to be as strict with you as we have been, because she wasn't even 18 and she lost her life. And I think it made him realize that, he's now got 2 daughters who are unmarried. I mean, I was fighting arranged marriage for a long, long time, very rebellious in that respect. And I think he just thought, okay, hands up now. I give in and go and live the life that you want to live.
Do you think, because this is the fact that you've had such a massive thing happen in your family, I think from parents that have come from a traditional household where before it would have been, girls didn't used to get educated, they get arranged marriage, everything that you've said. In many households, and even in our household, there was big shifts when big things happened. And obviously that's something that happened in yours. It sort of jolts the parents to say, oh my God,
yes,
this is where you are. You need to adapt to whatever the situation is.
Yes. Yeah. That was a huge factor in so many ways. If that didn't happen, I wouldn't have met my husband. I wouldn't have started the acupuncture course. I would never have met him. I don't know where I would be right now. I really don't. Real kind of believer in things. There's a path. Do you know what I mean? And you end up down this path if you don't kind of resist what's coming your way and you just allow things to happen. You end up where you're meant to end up,
So why do we, is more of a question for all of us, why do we think parents stay so strict, but then when these big life changes things happen, it's not as if, what happens? Why does it change a person?
But I think it happens to anyone. It's not just our parents. I mean, I remember, I've said this previously on a podcast, when Marcy passed away, it was a bit of a, oh my God, I'm not enjoying my job. I want to make a change. And that's where it's like, well, actually, like you said, Sue, it's about making a conscious decision of, okay, so what is it that you actually want to do? What would make you happy? Because life
But then why
short.
aren't we thinking now? Because before it would have been, make sure, for example, you don't go out with this non-Asian in front of the community. Now, why didn't the community matter? What was that? What made the change of, it doesn't matter what the community say anymore, to live your life?
That's a good question.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one, because you know what, my dad, so he had this very strong persona and this very strong mind, and he always taught us, don't even think about what other people say. Don't do this. Don't worry about what other people are saying. So he would teach us that. But then on the other hand, and I think it was probably more my mum's influence, more so than my dad. My mum would be like, yeah, but what will Lokiki Goge, what will the community say? And, people will talk and gossip about us. And I think that was one of my mum's biggest fears, because unfortunately, that's what the community did.
I was going to say, but this is, and we'll come on that because that's going to be a big part of what then happened next in your life. I think your question as to why is it that you then sort of get away from what the community is worrying about, because you sort of realize, well, actually, we need to live our lives essentially.
You do. And I think when you have a death in the family, I think it really stops you in your tracks. I know for me personally, I felt like after she died, I woke up, because I felt like I was sleepwalking through life. I wasn't really paying any attention to what was my future, what was going on, nothing. I was just like day to day, just, doing the everyday kind of stuff. Yeah. And honestly, it just felt like sleepwalking. And when she died, I felt like I was my eyes have been opened and I started to question absolutely everything. Like, what am I doing in my life? Am I enjoying my job? I could die tomorrow.
Yeah.
What will I have done in my life? Do you know what I mean?
A lot of people say it's not when you come towards the end, it's not what you did do, it's what you didn't do. You tend to regret anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's a massive thing in itself.
Yeah, huge thing. And probably the same for my parents as well. They probably thought, wow, we've just spent the last however many years raising our children like this, knowing that, they haven't achieved what they wanted to achieve, i.e. their girls married off in their early 20s. And do you know what I mean? And
so the thing is, when you told your, go on, Belle, you go first.
I was just gonna just the last thing on that point. I think the other thing we need to realize is, look, we're all learning. It's not the fact that from now we're going to be like, oh yeah, we've sorted everything, because life is life, right? You have to adapt.
Yes.
And that's the aim of the game. You've got to, and that's the same with our parents. I mean, I was having a conversation with my dad a few weeks ago when I went back, and I could see there was a change in the cogs in his brain as well, because the penny had dropped on something.
Yeah,
so life is a learning curve.
It is a learning curve, and if you're open-minded enough, you can learn from it. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are people that just carry on as they are. You know what I mean?
So when you told your dad, right? Oh, who told him? Your mum told him? Or you?
My mum told him.
And then what happened from there?
My dad initially said no. I don't know. I think when it hit, I think it was a knee-jerk reaction, and I think he just resorted back to his, oh my God, I wanted a traditional this and I wanted that. So it's a knee-jerk reaction of no, she can't see him, kind of thing. And then my brother actually spoke to my dad. I'd had a few words with my dad as well. And I said, look, just meet him. I said, he practices Buddhism. So I'm like trying to sell this guy to my dad. And knowing that my dad is very much similar in the sense that, philosophically, spiritually, he loves all that sort of thing. And I said, you two will get on quite well because you'll have a lot to talk about. Yeah, and it was my brother who actually said to my dad, he said, look, you've already lost one daughter. You need to really think about this carefully. Do you want to lose another daughter? Let her do what she wants to do, but then cut her out of your life? Or do you want to be a part of her life? And me and my dad being the eldest, I was really close to my dad. And I could never see that happening, like him disowning me. I always kind of knew in the back of my mind, that's just not going to happen because we're so close. He might say it, but he won't follow through, kind of thing.
They just say it.
Yeah, they say it because, that's what they think they need to say. And that's what tradition and culture tells them to say. But actually, he's got a heart and he's not going to do that. And he didn't do that. He accepted it.
But the fact of similarity, that's what it comes down to. It's when our parents say, or we say, oh, get married to someone that's similar to you so they can gel with the family.
Yes.
So it's not hard.
Yes.
You don't have that language barrier. You don't have the cultural differences.
Yes.
And that's in essence why it's go for someone similar to yourself so life isn't hard.
Yes. Yeah.
And that makes sense, essentially.
Completely makes sense. And I think if our culture valued women as much as they value men, I think I would have gone down that traditional route, because for me, I did think about the long-term things. I thought about if I get married to somebody who lives, I don't know, in Scotland or hours away from my own family, I wouldn't be able to be there for my family. And that was quite a big thing for me, was that I just wanted to be close to them so that if they needed help, I could help them. I didn't want to be beholden to another family and for them to dictate to me, well, no, you can't go and see, your mum and dad, or we are your priority now. Do you know what I mean?
So in regards to, your dad did come round eventually after everyone spoke to him. How did the community take it when people did find out?
They were actually, I think my parents were more concerned about our immediate relatives. And our immediate relatives were absolutely on board and perfectly fine. And they were saying, this is the age now. This is what children are going to do, because this is what, late 90s, early 2000s by now. And so they said, and they knew, me being the eldest, I'm still not married. Just let her get married now, let her live her life now, kind of thing. So it was a really positive response. I don't think there was a single relative of ours that outwardly, or to my parents' face said, what on earth, what are you doing, kind of thing. So I think that really kind of helped and boosted my parents really, and made them feel like, okay, yeah, this is fine, this is good.
Was there any, but suppose your mum and dad worked in the shop, so maybe this isn't the right question, but was there any language barriers or understanding barriers with your husband where you thought, oh God?
No, I mean, my dad's English was pretty good, and, he could hold a conversation, no problem at all. And my mum, push comes to shove, she will speak in English.
I hope your husband has now learned Punjabi or whatever language you speak, just so that your mum doesn't have to push.
I mean, my husband,
English.
Initially my husband was like learning the basics, and Japiniya,
I was going to say Chabana,
Japini, Hanji, and he learned how to make Indian tea, and he's very interested in the Indian culture and loves Indian food. And I think he felt like, I think he thought getting married to me, he'd have like a wife who'll be cooking all this Indian food.
Obviously not.
It's not my forte at all. So him.
He's doing all the cooking. He's doing all the roti.
He'll be like, go to my mum and dad's house. Yeah, we're going to go to mum and dad's house and get all this Indian food, because he wasn't getting it at home. So
what did we do?
I think he gelled with my mum just on that front, because my mum loved to cook and he loved her food. My mum will say, do you want this, that and the other? Like, I want all of it. She'll be like, hey, yeah, here you go.
I wouldn't say no to that. I mean, if someone cooked me loads of food, I'm like, yep, that's fine.
Exactly. I was like, yeah, go to my mum.
So immediate family were very positive. What about did you even notice the rest of the community? Or was it a case of,
I didn't really notice. I mean, I wasn't really, I've always kind of kept myself away from the Indian community in Swindon. So I wasn't, if anything was being said, I have no idea. And actually when we got married, so usually with an Indian wedding, you invite the whole world, don't you?
Yeah.
Yep.
I never really wanted a marriage like that. I never really a wedding. Sorry, I just wanted my immediate relatives. Like my mom, my dad's one of 10, my mom's one of 6. We got cousins coming out of our ears. That was like, that's enough. We know all of them. I just genuinely wanted people that I know, not people that I don't know. So actually, when I got married, hardly anyone from the community was invited.
Which was that you said that as a conscious decision that you stayed away from the community.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is it because of the gossip in the community? Why did you choose to go down that path?
Because I think growing up, you do get to hear about what the community is like, and the gossip. Even auntie are coming around, and you kind of listen in and you think, wow, is that all you guys talk about? Do you know what I mean?
But you know what? I'm going to come back on that one, because we did grow up in quite an Indian sort of area and all that sort of stuff. And what you've just said, where on the outside, yes, you hear the inequalities with women and but I found just growing up in that area, well, actually, it was quite nice being part of that community, because you felt part of a community.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, and that's something we try to bring out on Changing Suits, where superficially, yes, there are issues, 100%, and we are very much well aware of it, which is why we've got a weekly podcast looking at taboo topics. So it works out well for us because we've got something to talk about.
Yeah.
But going deeper into it, there's a reason. I mean, I went to when I went to India, actually, there was like a women's program, and before I'm like, oh my god, these women can't sing and all this sort of stuff. But when I went to, beautiful voices. But when I step back now, as I've grown, I'm like, do you know what? It's so beautiful that they get together. Yes, they do have a bit of a chit chat, a bit of a gossip, but that's their community. That's who they're connecting with. This is so important for their well-being.
Yes.
So even those negatives now, I'm starting to realize, well, actually, for that person, for that community, it's fantastic you're doing it.
It's absolutely, I completely agree with you. I think as a child, you don't realize, do you? You don't have that understanding that, you know what, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. It's the connection, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
When I went to university, I went to South Bank University, which was absolutely chock-a-block full of Indians and Africans. And that was like, I felt like I'd gone to India. You know what I mean? It was like such a shock to the system because so many apne and, you know, talking in Punjabi, which was just not done in Swindon. You know, you just don't have that really. And most of my friends, in fact, all of my friends from university are Indian. And most of my friends, like girlfriends, are Indian. And it was because I found that connection with the Indians. And I felt like, my God, you understand me, or you understand my background. Like no English friend of mine has understood my background. You know, there's been such a contrast.
Do you think that happens as you grow older? Because again, coming from Ilford, I remember walking down the road and a couple of doors down, you were like, oh, Sashrika auntie, how you doing? And it was every other door. But then when I came to Swindon, there was nothing.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I know they're annoying, but where are they?
You barely see, like, and I'm born and bred Swindonian, right? And we go into town like every week. You would barely see Indian people anywhere, you know, other than the Gurdwara.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, so Sue, coming back to it, so you've got married.
Yeah.
We're good. So just talk to me through the cultural side of it. So you've said you don't cook. That's been quite clear.
I do now. I didn't then. I have to.
Let's talk about the cultural differences, and then I want to move on to the cultural similarities as well, because I think that's a really important point as well. So what cultural differences have you found between your husband and his family and your own culture and your family? So differences first and then similarities.
Do you know what? I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't see many differences between his family. He's Irish.
I was going to say Irish, they have a very family orientated as well, aren't they?
First time I went over to Ireland and met his family. No, actually, there was a time when we went to Ireland. So my daughter was 5 months old, right? Went over there, stayed with his mum and dad, stepdad, and took our daughter, you know, here you go, here she is, kind of thing. They have this open door policy. They had neighbors coming in and out, giving us, it was almost like Jesus and the three wise men. Do you know what I mean? It was like a neighbor coming in, here you go, here's a little present for you. Somebody else coming in, here you go, here's a little present for you. Just people coming in and out. His uncle and aunt just walking, like not even ringing the doorbell, just coming in. And I thought to myself, we don't even have that in our house. Do you know what I mean? We don't, like, I don't know. It was just such a sense of real community and real compassion, you know, genuinely coming from the heart. Nobody's saying to them, all right, you know, you need to do this now. You could really feel the love coming from them. And sometimes I think, again, I found as a child, you know, we have this thing in the Indian culture where somebody passes away and then people come for absource, yeah? As a child, I could tell which ones were genuine, coming from the heart, and which ones were coming out of duty. I could really easily make that distinction. And that used to really bother me because I used to think, if you're not doing it from the heart, why are you bothering to come in? Do you know what I mean? I found that really hard to kind of understand because I'm not that person. I don't do things because I've been told to do it or the culture tells me to do it or tradition tells me to do it. If I feel like I don't want to do that or it's not coming from the heart, I'm just not going to do it, you know? Okay. But I found with the Irish, I think that was quite a, you know, significant kind of an eye-opener for me was that people were only coming, and not all his relatives came. You know, some of them didn't come to visit us, and that was absolutely fine. But that also made you know that the ones that are coming.
Can I ask you? Sorry, Taj. Go on. Just on that point, do you coming from that community, you then have seen it as that person's doing it as part of duty, and that person's obviously doing it out of love. Whereas your husband's from the Irish community, so he he might have said the same thing. It's just because we're from that community, we've then, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'd be interested to know from you. Do you think we're a bit harsher on our own communities, but we see other communities in a bit of a lighter way? And I have no idea what you're going to say to this.
I mean, you can see flaws, I suppose, in both. There's no community is perfect. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There's always going to be drawbacks. There's always, I mean, one common theme, I think, within communities is this need to discuss other people's lives, you know, or have an opinion or form a judgment or whatever. I think I see it more in our community where we're more judgmental. We seem to have more opinions on other people that we don't even know. So not only have I met my husband's family, so my previous boyfriend, who was not Indian, I met all of his family as well. And again, with his family, so he was half Irish.
And, you like the Irish?
Yeah, there's definitely a theme there. Yeah. And for the years that I'd known them, I didn't get that real sense of people being judgmental, people having an opinion on other families.
But was it because they weren't doing it in front of you? Because you're
no, I actually found them to be quite open and just be themselves in their house, you know, and not put on an act. Do you know what I mean? Or not an act, but like this duty that you get.
Do you think it might be because I've noticed in the UK now, we have got away from getting together and stuff like that, and you know, meeting up on the weekends, getting together, having that whole love and the community feel. When I went to France, and there's just starting to come over from India and stuff like that, there was a sense of love and everyone wanted to be there. So many of their cousins, and they weren't even related to us, came over to see us, and it felt genuine love. It felt like they wanted to see us and not because they were forced to see us. And that's what used to happen in the UK community. But now people just don't have time.
No, and it's really sad. It is really sad. And I think actually I need to make a distinction between like family, immediate family. You do sense the love, like in our community, you do get the feeling of they are there for you. Do you know what I mean?
The wider community.
It's the wider community where you don't really know them and you're not, you know, you don't really see them. And so therefore you don't get that connection. You know what I mean? And you're right. Nowadays, people are too busy to do anything, you know, for other people.
So is that because you think that we've become, it's for both of you, do you think we've become more westernized and we're like, okay, we don't have time for you. It's just more selfish. We just don't have time. Because then why were they still doing it in France where everyone was just meeting up and they were just there for each other? They'd get together on birthdays. And some of them were really distantly related, a cousin of a cousin's cousin, but they were still getting together.
Do you think it's also because obviously I know we've had this conversation about France and how you enjoyed that part of it, because they're newer than what we are generationally. We've sort of found our feet here now. We're busy. We're busy now because we've
built our foundations.
We've got the foundations, and now we're growing as a community. So we're in our own little thing. Whereas
over there in France, are they all related to each other? Are they
distantly or friends? Yeah, they're friends of friends or cousins of cousins. Maybe because the community's smaller.
Yeah, I was going to say, because for me personally, I've only got a couple of cousins in Swindon, and that's it. They're my relatives. I don't have any other distant relatives in Swindon. So because there weren't any children like, I don't know, my age growing up, or we didn't really have that get-togethers with children our age kind of thing. Because you didn't have that, you can't kind of form that when you're older. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're very, very distant. So I still see my cousins. I still have a relationship with them. But I do think that if I had more relatives here, more of us would be getting together. But our relatives are scattered all over the place, you know.
So do you think in your husband's case that his community was a bit like how it is in France, where they were closer together and that's why you were getting all the cousins and everyone meeting up because they were closer together.
They were closer together, but it wasn't just relatives. Like I say, it was the neighbours as well, and friends.
okay.
Like my mother-in-law's friend would, you know, drive over, and still does whenever we go over there. They will make the effort to come and. So a bit like India, really. You know, it's that. So to me, they're quite similar. Like they're very family orientated, very community orientated. So. And I'm trying to think of the differences. And the only difference that I can think of is my mother-in-law isn't a cook like my mum. So that's it. That's the only difference. Yeah.
At least you've got something in common now.
Yes. Exactly.
And we're gonna leave it on that point, because I think that's a really nice point to leave it on, actually. The fact that, well, actually, culturally, we're very similar, regardless of the colour of our skin.
Yes.
There are big similarities, and you can't even think of the differences apart from the fact that your mother-in-law doesn't cook, but then nor do you, so it's all good.
It's great.
I'm going to give you the last sort of line here, Sue. Is there anything else? I mean, for listeners who are have been through a very similar thing, where perhaps you do have two different cultures, although we found that it's not actually too different. How do you think they should approach their lives and their communities and their parents to make sure that they realise that actually culturally we're not too different, people? We're not different.
I think, first of all, I mean, the older generation, I kind of understand it's really hard in terms of change, and that's quite a massive change for that generation to accept. But I think our generation, you know, as we're having our kids, and for me, I think we need to be quite open-minded and not carry the same assumptions that our parents have carried, because I think my parents also learned that, you know, my mum and dad used to say, wow, they're like us, kind of thing. Like in their heads, they were like, oh, they're so different from us. Yeah. You know, they had no idea. They didn't have relationships with other English people to actually learn and understand.
It's that awareness thing, isn't it?
It is an awareness, but you have these fixed ideas that, oh, we are like this and they are like that. And when they met my in-laws, and I think it was a bit of an eye-opener for them, like, oh, wow, they're quite similar to us, and they're all about family, and they're all about giving, you know, like my mother-in-law would always give gifts when she came over. Do you know what I mean? It was very, very similar. So I think just keep an open mind. If, you know, your child wants to have a relationship with somebody outside of the community, get to know that community, because every community has something good to offer. We have lots of good things to offer. Somebody else from another community has so many good things to offer, but you have to be open to it and not kind of shut off from it and think, no, we have to stay, because it will work. It will work. It always does work if you're allowed to make it work, you know?
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story, Sue, because obviously I think whatever the story is, it's always nice to hear these personal stories, because this is your life, and many, many people are going through very, very similar things.
Yes.
So thank you so much for your time today. And carry on your great work, guys, with the allotment. It's looking fantastic.
Thank you.
I was going to say, Taj, this is the time to plug the allotment now, actually. Go for it.
Yeah, if anyone else wants to join, just message us and we get involved. It's brilliant for your well-being, and we have a great laugh, don't we, Sue?
We do. I love it.
Perfect.
Thanks you very much.
Thank you.
That's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.